I would like to welcome our very exciting artist, Sally Smart, who is our latest commissioning collective artist, the second time we've done this, and Brooke Stamp, who is a recurring collaborator of Sally's, and Brooke will also be performing at the launch this evening, which is very exciting. So could we please make them feel welcome? I'll be really stepping back and letting these two wonderful artists do most of the talking today, but I thought I might just kick things off with a question, sort of a question and an observation, I suppose, to do with the title of this work, The Artist's Ballet. I like that title in terms of bringing everything that Sally is interested in into a sort of an interesting place, because we so often think of artistic practice in terms of visual arts as a very solitary endeavor, and it can be. But a ballet, I mean, I've never seen a solitary ballet. I'm sure it could exist. But generally speaking, you've got the music, you've got the visuals, you've got the stage, you've got the lighting, you've got the dancers, of course. So it's quite an involved production, not unlike this wonderful work, but I thought maybe that's an interesting place to start, both for Sally and Brooke. So Sally, maybe you had some thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that introduction as well. It is just, yes, it is absolutely great to be on this country, and I've had just the best time walking up and down every morning and every evening. It's been brilliant. So, and thank you to everybody. I'd just like to say that this just on the outset too. It's been well, it's a wonderful opportunity, and which I've taken and embraced absolutely. And everyone's been incredible, and installation team have been amazing. So thank you, Jonathan, and all the team. So yes, clap for everybody, because it's been stunning and the hospitality has been brilliant. So thank you. Opportunities like this actually don't come along that often, and so it's really fabulous. And you know how I feel about regional places, because I grew up regionally and far north South Australia. So I think it's a really incredible achievement. And Brooke yesterday saw this space for the first time and is equally impressed. And it really is, it says a lot about the community, I think, that this building is and the land it stands on. So that's also brilliant. So thank you. Okay, let's move on to some things about the Artist's Ballet. But as a title, yes, it's sort of, you're absolutely right. It does encompass everything, I think, as well, especially this journey I've been on for about the last decade, where I have sort of been looking more, well, I've always been interested in the space, and actually Brooke and I go back much further than a decade, actually. But we, this space of intersection between visual art and dance, especially in the 20th century. And that was, for me, very much around the very, very early modernism and the avant-garde, seen in the experimental work of the Ballet Russe, but also right through the 20th century, a lot of those relationships, actually, between often visual artists and dancers and choreographers that created a lot of incredible work. So I guess we could just launch off that. And I'll just say that we first met, I think we first met, you came to my studio, didn't you?
Yeah, I came to your studio. I think we met through a mutual friend, collaborator, Philip Adams, who was the director of a company called Ballet Lab in Melbourne. And you had a long history with Philip also. And I think we intersected sort of through him and his work with you also. And I did wind my way to Sally's studio probably as someone in my mid-20s and became a kind of subject or model in your studio for photography, but also dressing in various costumes. So I would turn up to Sally's studio and sort of stand on plinths or kind of be, she'd situate me in front of different textiles or different backdrops and pin me in skirts and fabrics and dress me in different things. And from those kind of sessions together, I think, create material for cutouts or various different silhouettes that found their way into your future works. Is that true?
No, that is so true. I was thinking it was because with Philip and I had gone to, I'd been in the School of Visual Arts at the VCA, and he was in the School of Dance, and we both won the ANZ Travelling Scholarship. And we went to New York, actually, and then he stayed for 10 years. I came back. And then he lived around the corner from me, and so we reconnected. But he had, his company was called Ballet Lab, and I always loved the fact that he had ballet there as well. So it traces back. And then you were really quite young, and you were working with Philip. And then we connected, and then, yes, I would pose you in front of all sorts of things and take photographs, Exquisite Pirate, way back, right in the early days. And then that moved into even some fittings. I made some costumes for Philip, and then you came for some fittings, some intestine, I remember.
Yeah, some umbilical cords.
Umbilical cord, that's right, it was. And then from that, we also met in New York at another time when I did my first show in New York. And actually Philip also did his first show, and they were within a week of each other. And you were performing, and then you came to my opening, I think, or a few days later. We met then.
So I mean, I guess that's the backdrop in terms of when you mentioned this like collaborative and spaces and intersections across art forms. There really is this lovely backdrop of relationships as well that kind of perpetuate these new, like, ongoing relationships and new relationships and ways of interacting between, different practices and art.
That's right. It did. I mean, it's over 20 years, or nearly 20 years. So it's a long time, and so it is. We made it quite smooth. It seemed quite smooth. So when moving forward into when I started going to Indonesia, and I had some artisans make costumes for me, and they were cutouts, and I cut up the Ballet Russe costumes actually in made digital collages, and then they made them out of embroideries, and then they came back and I thought, these are so incredible, I've got to have them performed. And so I said to Brooke, would you, I can't remember if we did anything before then. Maybe we did something, there was an intervention in a work I had, a poster, that was in the 2000s. And there was a whole company danced in front of a work of mine. But so who was I to call? Brooke. Because we'd worked together so many times, and I think you'd been travelling overseas and back and forth and doing various things. I said, can you come in? I don't know what I want to do, Brooke, but I know, I just want to do something, just hold it up and stand in front of my painting. And because you were so, we'd had such a great relationship, back to that idea of having these relationships and how important these discourses are, and how you learn to trust each other's practice. So we did that, and Brooke was amazing, stunning. Everyone who was coming into the gallery that day we were just doing it openly, and I definitely was pinning into you that day because there was nothing to sort of pin these things, and I'm like pinching and putting, and I'm always saying different things, now jewellery here, no jewellery there. You remember, I would always be, and I realised I was really directing. And of course I've always been directing elements by myself, pinning them to a wall, but it was a bit, so then I just started pinning it onto Brooke. So I learned a little bit more care around that space, but not much. Brooke can attest to that.
Dancers make great, pin models. We're just like very adaptable, actually, and I don't know. Yeah, it's something in the kind of DNA of the dancer also to be to understand how to be a subject and to kind of work.
There is an element of puppetry in some of these. You're like a puppet sometimes. I wonder, Sally, when you're working with Brooke or another dancer, what is the start point between you? Do you have a conversation? Is it have a look at this work? Like, for example, there'll be a performance tonight. How do you get that sort of a collaboration just started from the very first instance with the piece?
Because we now have history, it's really great. We can have all these different touch points, especially with Brooke, because Brooke is really also a choreographer with me as well. She's my choreographer, basically. That's how and she's taught me so much. It's been quite incredible. So Brooke is always my lead. She's the choreographer. She's also the dancer. And so our conversations are probably more intense, a bit more different, more wide-ranging. With some of the dancers that I might, like with Jo and Dee, although I would have a sort of a book, I create a book of visuals, and then they come into the studio and I just discuss all the ideas, all the conceptual ideas that are surrounding. I'll discuss the scenography, I'll discuss the costumes, and then we proceed from there. But with Brooke, also, we had, the last time we worked, I had all these choreographic prompts, because we also have another collaborator that we work together with, Maria Tamarkin, and she's a cultural writer. So she writes this great poetry and really incredible language. And her daughter, Billy, also sings opera with us as well. But because I think it was actually Maria's writing that opened up these choreographic directions a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah. I think that's an interesting thing to flesh out as well, because the relationship between text and the body, and Maria's writing, but also your writing, Sally, as well as what we might refer to as scores, or visual scores, or something that really has evolved through music, or traditionally through music, where you think of a musical composition, but that became sort of more abstracted over time, and especially in contemporary music, where images could be interpreted, or symbols and things. And so also like Laban notation, a choreographer who worked a lot with kind of notating the body and the body's movements. And there's a lot of this, a lot of references to that in Sally's drawings or sketches and markings. So yeah, there's a huge kind of collection of, maybe you could think of it as source material, whether it's like images, text, language, symbols, drawings, writing, fabrics, textiles, these kinds of inputs that I think are then kind of used by the dancers. But it would be important to maybe mention that my practice as well specifically deals in improvisation. So across time, across like 10 to 15, 20 years now, through always coming together and having these discussions about what the materials are, what the themes are, or what's interesting Sally on a particular project, you know, this is like thoroughly kind of teased out together, but in a moment or in a performance, the response is like very improvisational. And it, you know, myself and other dancers can be responding to particular elements that we've discussed that Sally has kind of created for us through language or visuals. But also across time, there's been a kind of accumulation of a type of history and an accumulation of performances. And we do talk about our history of performance now as like being iterative. So there's, on one hand, there's a really strong through line in our relationship now that has accumulated across time, and a trust that you were speaking of. But there's also this opportunity every time we meet to build upon our history, but also for new iterations to kind of emerge.
So that's how we will do tonight. Because that's exactly it. It's like we've already had a discussion. There'll be some points in here that will be points that Brooke will find, and I know that they'll be spatial, there'll be sound, I can sort of envisage some of them. We've talked about a recent performance, the fabulous performance, a solo that Brooke just did in Melbourne and then took to New York only 2 days ago, 3 days ago.
I got back 2 days ago.
And I saw it, and it was just stunning. But I was picking out of it. So, oh, I want that bit. I want that bit and that bit. You know, like it was like that. So I just said to Brooke last night, you know, that bit, and that bit. It was like that simple, because it really is this incredible relationship. You know, it's just. Although Brooke gave a really great summary of it there, it's just like that. It's just, but it's built up over such a time, and I can't understate how rich that is, really. And that's why she's sitting next to me, because she's part of this. She's totally part of this, such a big part of all of this. So bringing it to life through the body, this embodying. And sometimes it's just about saying a few words, and the dancers, the interpretation I give, that they take it, you know, they take that and then they turn it into magic. So
I'm really interested in both of you in terms of being different artists that have your own concerns and visions. I'm really interested in how you enjoy and experience what the other person does with that conversation and with that connection. For me, as an artist, I can have a reasonable go at something written or a reasonable go at some music or something, but for me, dance is just... it's probably on my continuum of what I can do. It's at that very, very, very far end. So I find it really fascinating, that sort of conversation between you. So I wonder, you know, how do you go about that? Do you enjoy that? Well, you must enjoy it after 15 years, but how do you see that and experience that interaction at the end of the day? Like, I know that's a bit of an obscure question, but
No, it's a great question, actually, Jonathan, isn't it? For me, I would say, well, I'm on that spectrum with you down here, but I'm not in other ways. You know, I'm completely. I don't even ever want. Sometimes the dancers will say, "Oh, Sally, you know, you come in, you do something." There's no way. I am really happy over there. Thank you, watching it. You know, like I really am not. I'm not a performance artist. You know, that's the thing. I'm not a performance artist, and I'm not a dancer. But making art has always been performative in a private sense. And so I can understand it, you know, and conceptually take it in, and know what I'm trying to set up. So it's completely conceptual for me in that sense. So I don't have to, and as an interdisciplinary artist, the interdisciplinary is that I don't have to do the dancing. That actually I don't have to be, that I'm not multidisciplinary in that sense. I don't have all those disciplines. I sort of bring it into my practice. And I think that's the best place for how I do it. But
well, oh gosh, I've got a lot that I could say to this. I've got to pick one or two things, because my first thought is that, like, working with Sally, it really is and feels like we're bringing ideas to life, or bringing her work to life, bringing our shared interests to life, and through the intersection of her practice and mine. And inherently in that is there is a trust, but also a spontaneity. And it's very rare, I would say, as a dancer, to work with someone who doesn't need to have, let's say, complete control over the outcome of a performance or of a work, or a particular expectation of what the event will look like, feel like, be like. And I think there's something inside that is really the essence of what it is when we come together. There's a real trust in the spontaneity of what an event and what all of the materials can produce together. And it's very rare to have the opportunity to work like that, because and just to say, it reminds me, I suppose, like art historically, of, if you know about John Cage and Merce Cunningham, fabulous avant-garde musician and choreographer, and something about their practices together maintained a type of interdependence in the practices, and so each would create a type of like score or set of conditions for their, one musical composition, one dance composition, and then the premise was to sort of bring them together and see what happened when they came together. And that is a very different conception of a performance to this idea of making theatre or making a work across time in which you'd spend 6 to 8 weeks developing a show. And it's not to say that I think Sally and I would love to do that.
We do. Well, that's our next aim.
Our next aim actually is to maybe really spend time in a studio developing something together. And there's questions there around resources. That takes, a lot of resources. It takes a schedule, carving out time in both two people's very busy schedules to do that. But just to say, there's really something about bringing work to life, and particularly for me as a dancer, because Sally has these very innate interests historically in dance, the avant-garde, the ballet russe, but also choreographers and women choreographers, Martha Graham, Pina Bausch. There is always, and because of this relationship to like cutting, collaging, assembling, deconstructing, reconstructing, all of that language that Sally uses is very common language to dance, deconstructing a movement, assembling two body parts together to create movement. So there really is a shared language, but they're just kind of used in different ways in our practices.
And all the body parts as well. I mean, it's quite funny sometimes when I have all the dancers come to an opening and they see their work, my works, even the paintings, that big, large collage. Is that my leg? No, that's my leg. And then, that's my arm, though. And they are. I mix them all up. And I often do that with, I remember having a dancer actually did this residency in America, and she was so trained, really formally, really tightly trained, and I wanted it to be a bit different, a bit more subversive. Mm-hmm. And so I went and got my shoes, and I said, now do that again, but in my shoes. And that was sort of what I was after, but that was a bit horrifying for her, but Brooke wouldn't be horrified by that. She doesn't need my shoes, because it would be like, it's...
It's playful. It's also very, it's also quite playful.
Yeah, we do.
And that I would also say too is like really to be, held on to as a mode of being in art, because it's just important to keep that kind of spontaneous essence of things alive, and to really look at what emerges through an interaction rather than how we can tighten and constrict or make something so specific. We learn also.
That's right. We have to recognise it. We have to. It's a bit like an installation. Oh, I have to see it, actually, everybody, before I can say it's okay or not okay. So it's the same. And that's how I knew why I have gone so far into this, because I was doing all of these things and making art. So, but it is about finding it in the doing and the making. But that's why development would be so brilliant, which we will work towards this, and me doing costumes and scenography, and Brooke with choreography, and lots of talking and lots of coming together. I think that would be great, and we want to do that because our developments are quite small, just in terms of budgets, but we push beyond that way. And during COVID, we actually even had. I always make a model and. Of maybe the setup of the performance, and we were doing a performance because I also make the films. So there's a lot of editing that goes on and cutting in the putting together of the films as well. But then Brooke has done a lot of the live productions that we've worked together as well. So we've done so many different types of where Brooke has been in a crowd of like 100 people trying to move through at the Adelaide Festival. And that was quite extraordinary. And then there's others where we have massive big art fair, and so lots of challenging different spaces as well.
Yeah, and each space or site produces its own outcome, and just to reference that sort of iterative aspect of the practice, from each situation or event, we accumulate our responses and reflections, and a lot of that information then passes into our next kind of set of interests or propels us forward,
What changes have you both experienced in terms of your collaboration and your relationship over that period of time? Because it's quite a long period of time, and a lot of collaborations do not last that long. Mm-hmm. So what sort of changes have there been, and what's stayed the same as well?
Well, it was absolutely fascinating to see Brooke's recent performance solo, and what I couldn't believe, and I hadn't seen Brooke for a little while actually. I'd been travelling, you'd been travelling. Brooke would be in Melbourne, and we might catch up for coffee or a drink or something, but we weren't seeing each other's work. And then I saw this work, and I couldn't believe it. Because I'd been talking with Jack, my son, in New York as well, and because he does all the editing and he does all the sound. And I said, it was amazing. It was amazing, because Brooke is absolutely where we are we've been talking about these new works and things. She's absolutely there. We're all there at the same point. How did we do this? How did we all get to that, get from this to there? Because it doesn't all, you're right, and it doesn't happen with everyone. But it did happen. It was one of the most striking things that I saw. And what was different? Well, it was just the things that Brooke was doing with sound, her movement, the whole production. It was all the things that I'd been thinking about, and how not necessarily doing in performance, but doing in art in other ways. So it was all there. So it was sort of fascinating. I don't know. We're just looking at the world in a certain way, a certain time. I don't know. It's complex, actually.
Yeah, I find that difficult to answer that question, because but one thing maybe I could say is, like, we are kind of travelling independently in a way, and maintain our own sets of interests and practices, but are always somehow in communication across time through that. Sally will be in India and I'll text her from Paris, like, what is going on, what are you doing, or what are you thinking about, or what are you planning? And there is something about always coming back to the collaboration, but with a type of accumulation of our own experiences that then we can really bring together. And I would say, from the perspective of a dancer, it's not like working in a company where you are really working long term with a particular person or a particular set of ideas. There's a lot of room actually for us to bring to the table what it is we've each been sort of thinking about, but there is always a constant through line. I mean, there's obviously just a connection and a set of shared interests, and the solo that Sally is referencing, I'm sure there's a lot of information that I've gleaned from working with Sally over the past 5 years, especially in this project, the choreography of cutting, which is a type of ongoing framework that I think of, where we've had different iterative performances, and really embodied methods I've dealt with in terms of referencing Martha Graham or referencing Merce Cunningham, these choreographers that are very influential historically. A way of thinking about an archive, a way of thinking about the body as an archive, and also what informs my particular physicalities. And so there's really something where it's a little bit like you're always with me, actually.
Yeah.
Somewhere, you're always somewhere.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. even as I go through my own processes, you know, it's very
And I can
haunting.
recognise it, and I guess I've got you around on the walls all the time in some form, cutting up or rearranging in some form. I know. So yeah, it's pretty special actually. It's pretty unique actually as well. Yeah.
I was just going to say, if we wanted to open it up for questions, I'll bring this round.
Do you have a musical collaborator as well, like to do music?
Yeah, well, in a way, when we were previously our history, Jack, my son, was doing sound for the videos, and also Billy was singing, and so we sort of were just putting it together like that, and we were I would be listening to Prokofiev if it was something to do with the shoot or the ballet russe or the different composers, and then I'd bring that to the table and we'd work on that in a sort of pretty rough way. But Brooke has serious collaborations with musicians because you sort of have to.
Yeah. I think really for our past performances, they sort of echo this sort of like avant-garde, maybe where if it's just me, it's often just me in silence, but also the information in the room and the sounds of the room, and also, you know, there's a lot of space there for the body to be really seen and witnessed as this sort of vehicle of the performance. So if I'm potentially making sound, or, you know, the breath, I mean, I think of, there's been a number of performances where I really think, oh gosh, my breath is the soundtrack to that, you know, show, because, you know, like really like after a while, you know, but then, yeah, these broader collaborations with this opera singer Billy, or text, you know, often these bigger collaborations with other dancers have had Maria reading text while we've been performing. So yeah.
So I encourage the more experimental, I guess, end of things, in the sense of poetry, lots of noise, yell out, say something, make a word. I encourage that. So yeah, sound is important from that point of view.
Just in relation to this particular work, and look, you mentioned about the body, but I'm looking at the videos and I'm looking at all this, and I sort of think that even the body is pursuing to movement, and I feel like my reading of it is the focus is not so much on but more about the movement. I'm just wondering, is that how you see it, or I completely missed the ballpark? Because I'm just looking at, you've got body parts, but they're not the focus. Do you see them?
The body parts, well, they sort of are in the curtain. I think it is very much about movement, which is reflective of the very fact that I've created it, you know, through that process of movement. And it's like the dance is like a trope for that, you know, in a sense, you could say, or the history of the curtain, all of those things sort of filter into that. But the body also becomes important when it's more maybe the cutting up of the body is more seen more visually in a painting or in a collage work that is sort of standalone, because you're reading through the composite parts, if you like, to make the choreography, or to make the movement, or to show movement, or to actually make the work look like it's attached to a sort of a particular gesture or some sort of act, or multiplicity of reading movements. So then I have to cut up, or I might have 2 legs, 3 legs, you know, to try and, try and replicate that sense of dance or movement. So yeah, so it's really using it in different ways and different times, I think. There are little bits of that here, but not like what you're saying. But what is really great about that question, though, for me, is where I've got to with this work, because just recently I did another exhibition, and when I was putting it together, I had And the other thing about the curtain is, I might say, is that here it's very much a curtain, but it's also textile, which is sort of going back to the idea of the textile is still important, in the sense textile as a surface for cutting and making art or painting or drawing, and its relationship to, as feminist, to women's practices historically as well, but also the curtain. But the thing that I've come to right now in the practice is that I'm actually almost got to the point of I am revealing it's like performing, the performing of the performance and is also like the making of the art. So I'm revealing that. This work reveals lots of those ways of making, but it also is revealing in the sense of I'm laying lots of things bare, and all over in this show, I think, in this exhibition. And that's for other people to come and make connections and come into the work, I think, because of that. So and it's even like why I've got the costumes down there, enough moving parts, Sharma, haven't we?
Any other questions? I'll just give you this for the benefit of the video.
It's maybe a bit more of a comment or a prompt, but so much of what you were talking about, performance and play, was relevant to the install this week. You were very much having play with the work, and we tested things and just put them up and took them down. But I just wanted, speaking of collaboration and the costumes, and did you just want to speak a little bit about the archive component and the new video by Jack?
Okay. Yep. Down the end here is that idea of laying it all out in a way, having the opportunity in a way to bring the artist ballet and all facets of what that can be, because it's this idea for me, for the community and the seeing of this work, is that art can be all of these things, and we can have these incredible interdisciplinary relationships, that we can have all of these types of relationships, and art can be extended enough to do that. And I have the costumes hanging down there, almost like a traditional hanging, and that's part of that. But then the video, I actually got, while I was doing all of this work, I wanted to also show, my Melbourne studio is a long way away. I wanted to bring you, the audience here, into my studio, because the artist ballet, the artist performance, the artist making, I needed to show you. So I gave Jack's, my son's, because he makes films, he said, just put the tripod on and just film yourself all the time, everything you're doing. So I started doing that. It was rather confronting, but anyway, I did it, and I said, I don't know, Jack, I really don't know about this, this footage. I really, it's like, and he said, like, just send it to me, just send it to me. And I kept sending it to him. And then I said, okay, well, you do it, you just do it, because we've been working together for actually there's a picture of him in there where I'm asking him to put something on the wall, and I think he's about 12. Anyway, he put that in there, it's hilarious. Anyway, he said, they'll send me more, send me things in the past. I said, really? I mean, really, come on. And he said, no, just send it to me, send me more. And then he got things offline. He got talks and lectures that I'd given, big amphitheatres, people, because he'd just seen an exhibition in New York, and this filmmaker had put historic material, had put documentary material, had put all these things together. He was really inspired. So he did this with my video. And so he's even laid there, and I wouldn't give anyone this material except him, because he was there, he grew up with it all. So I just trusted, back to that trust thing, and I gave it to him, and so he created it. And then he said to me the other day, he said, after talking for an hour, and then somebody asked you a question and you just, and he was like, he said, really it's the whole life of what an artist has to go through is on this video. He was like, and he's a young artist, so it was sort of, and he'd been listening to all of those things, which I never listen to, once it's done. Maybe I probably should a little more. But anyway, so that's what that is there. So if you'll see Brooke in rehearsal. You haven't even seen it yet, Brooke. It's like, it's rehearsal for the Violet Ballet. It goes back quite a long way, actually. So he's 29 nearly. It's all there. It's laid out. I've even got some tulle wrapped around me, sort of half naked, virtually at one point, in the corner, like moving around like a tutu. And that was 2000. I don't even think it was. I think it was 2008. Or earlier. So I was sort of rehearsing for this a long time ago, but not actually dancing to myself, right? Anyway, that elicited that response. Thank you, Simon.
So we'll all know more about you next time.
Yeah, if you study that, you'll see a whole lot. I'm talking back to this curator in London, and I said, "Didn't I just show you that a while ago?" That's on there, and I'm like, it's all laid there. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Jonathan.
So I wondered, it might not be anything, but I wondered, does the artist's easel have any particular symbolic importance for you? Because it's recurring throughout the curtain and in video works and that performance. Is it a symbol of something?
Yeah, it's sort of a similar painting of sort of art. And we did this in 2019, made this film, and did 3 days of filming. And the one thing that I wanted to do, I'd been in Paris because the Bendigo Art Gallery had commissioned me to do an exhibition with Bessie Davidson. It was called the Parisian Avant-Garde, Bessie Davidson and Sally Smart, and she was my great aunt, and she had gone to Paris with Margaret Preston, and they stayed there for 10 years together. They were partners, and then eventually Davidson came back to Australia, part of Australian modernism, very big part, and Bessie Davidson stayed in Paris, very successful artist. But what I wanted to do was make a dance film, and Joe Lloyd and Jan Butterworth were the dancers, and I don't know where you were, but you weren't around. Remember, you were away, and I couldn't get Brooke. Anyway, they were great, and we did it in 2019. We had 3 days, only 3 days of filming, and I had 7 scenes. And but when I was doing the research in Paris, I woke up, got back to Australia, and I had this vision or had this dream of a big theatre filled with easels, and because it was in the beginning of the 20th century, and it was it was such a traumatic period of European history, with the wars and also with the Spanish flu. But I also wanted to make a film that had a relationship to the sort of I guess 2 women artists grappling with gender, sexuality, history, war, modernity, all in Paris, expatriate. And it could be two women artists at any time. And that's what I wanted to sort of make the film about. And there was something in 7 scenes. Anyway, I had this image of 100 easels, empty easels, being almost symbolic of this sort of destruction. It could be like there were trees, it was like war, it could be like the end of painting, it could be all of those things. And it was adjacent, my arena adjacent to the art school, so Jack, and he was still a student there, I think, at the time, and they came across, wheeled across all the easels, put them up, and they danced through them. And it was sort of great, and then they would just smash them, smash them down. It was really about dragging them around. It was just one scene. We had 7 scenes to do, short amount of time, but it was just, it was sort of great. So that's why it's really quite important. And then, of course, this exhibition, and I won't go on about it, but you can watch it. And now the 2-channel work is actually now in Rockhampton Museum of Art. So that's great. And that can just be filmed, on a wall, anywhere, and seen, it's sort of quite an interesting film in the way it's 2-channel, the way these women are working, and they've got these special. I had made for them these see-through calico, or really thin muslin, actually, smocks, huge, and then I filled their pockets with charcoal. So they got really dirty really quickly, but charcoal and charcoal sticks and chalk, so they could draw at any time, and they did, as well. And the notations of that drawing for that film are up here, across there, and we photographed just before we were cleaning the hall. So that's that, but also it's actually talking about Pina Bausch. It was her Cafe Mueller, where she had a big, massive cafe scene of just empty chairs and tables, and that's where I got the easels from, for sure. That's right. So it's like that's how it works. and I just saw it in Adelaide for the first time, beginning of this year, or around the Adelaide Festival. Cafe Mueller was on, and I'd never seen it, and I saw it, and it was sort of great. Now I've seen it. Thank you. Great question. a long answer, because every little bit of things here can have a long answer. So it's for you, Easton, to go and find all those answers.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ali. I find it fascinating the collaboration and the sort of performance and the product. And I was just wondering, you're sort of talking about being a performer as an artist, but I think a lot of like visual artists, like product, sort of say, there's the art. Don't look at me, just look at that. And I was wondering if you've got any thoughts about that idea of the artist as a performer, bringing something more than a finished product.
Do you want to answer that, or do you want me? Because you are the performer. I'll look at.
Perhaps I should also say, any thoughts about the performer also being the artist?
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Well, I guess I guess I'm trying to work to my strengths, and that is that But I do see, of course, here I am performing, right? Always there's a certain amount of it always just embodied in the discourse, and I do like to talk about my work actually, and so I am interested in doing that, and I always have been. So I like discourse around, and I like talking, like within a sort of sense of about art and everything really, and so there's no. I don't have a problem in the communication of, I really enjoy that the more intimate discourses, I guess, that we have in terms of a directorial role that I would take on as an artist, and I don't mind the public presentations either, and in fact. I guess, it's been a long time I'm doing it, so I've been doing it for a fairly long time. So I guess I am that sort of artist. But I also just love being in the studio by myself, and I know the times that I need to be by myself and the concentration that takes, and it does, it really does, and the isolation that takes. So, and there are many artists that are performance artists as well, and they use their body in terms of art. But that's not me, so it's a different way. So I don't know, I haven't really answered your question, but I have no answer.
I think though, although it may sound a little bit abstract possibly, when I think about Sally's role in the kind of performative gestures of making a work like this, despite this aspect of your kind of like physical and imaginative labour not being particularly visible, I also know that every act of cutting, every act of, deconstructing, assembling, every choice, every opportunity to kind of assemble or reassemble these sort of parts, is an embodied act. I'm sure we have talked about that a couple of times, and although it may not be immediately visible, I definitely have a relationship to that in the sort of final outcomes of Sally's work. I really see how much it may not be performative in the essence that Sally is the sort of subject in these final outcomes, but the gesture and the labour and the sort of the kind of effort and attention to detail that goes into every act, I do see as sort of performative in some ways, and certainly embodied, you know. And so I really feel the outcome of all of that work and attention in these final works. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you know, I think we should do. I think we should choreograph me to do.
This is how we work. This is how we have ideas. Yeah. Yeah.
We should prove that.
Yeah. Yeah. We should.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about the gaze of the audience and whether you see that as an embodied act as well, or how you hope the audience might engage, in what ways you'd be interested to see the audience engage, and whether you see that as embodied or something some way.
Is that for both of us? For Sally? For both? Yeah. Certainly performing is relational and situated in a context of shared experience. So for me, there's something about attention and also witnessing, sharing an occasion. I feel very strongly about relating to the audience, but that doesn't necessarily mean a type of or a particular type of engagement through gesture, or a particular type of drawing the audience in through particular actions. But certainly in a space like the gallery, or like, and all galleries are different. But the way audiences respond firstly to the architecture of the place and to how they orient themselves towards an artwork, when I'm performing, I'm very aware of that. And I'm also very aware of how through my energy and attention, or particular gestures or pathways I take in space, how I might be able to kind of play with or guide attention in certain directions. And that's very much part of being an improvisational performer also, is that having an awareness and a consciousness of the room and how attention is being shared between the performer and the audience, like, it is very strong for me. I wouldn't imagine ever being able to sort of disregard the experience of the audience. And I would say, as someone who's been performing with Sally for a very long time, but also has a practice very strongly situated in museums and galleries, it is a very different way of performing to performing in the theatre. Often it's very raw, very exposed, no theatrical lights, nothing, the way audiences pay attention in a theatre is very coded. It's very organised. The lights go out, everyone's suddenly quiet, there's an expectation, there's a sort of silence, there's an apprehension around what's going to happen. And there are codes about how to behave in a theatre. The gallery has a lot more spontaneity and sort of possibility in terms of how people may situate themselves in relation to me. And I'm very prepared for that and very open and aware that the gallery invites a certain type of participation or inhabiting also of the body, and people do have the freedom to move around, and they do have the freedom to kind of watch from different vantage points. And I'm certainly very open to that and very interested in that as a performer.
And in fact, you are well known for that, because that's not everyone performs or has a practice like that. Brooke has a very particular, Museum of Modern Art, even the art fairs, to galleries in Australia, around the world, and in theatre. So, you know, you have a very particular practice, and which also makes Brooke a wonderful collaborator, because she, for a visual artist like me, because it's so open to all of these different sort of scenarios and representations and embodiments, if you like. So that's been great. And for me, if we're working together, then I too will I will recognise what Brooke is going to be up against, from being in a park to being in an art fair too. So I consider those things, and we talk about those, so I'm aware. But in terms of my work in a still situation, that I'm not here, Brooke's not here, this film, it's an artwork. I consider my audience, or the context of the audience, or the place, or the context of the art for the place, all of that goes into the making of the work. It's always, and then the subject of the work and the content of the work is also considered. Everything is considered. It always is and always has been, in a sense, for me. So, but then I can't do anything about it. And that's where you just give over. That's over. You can anticipate some things, but I can't control that. And I'm happy for people to have all the interpretations. If I've covered off what I wanted to do with the work, then I'm satisfied with that. That's the main thing for me. And then every other interpretation is completely subjective to others. You know, you can take those on yourself. And people do, and they will, and that's great, and that's art, and I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Brooke, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about your history of dance. Like, did you start as a classical dancer, and then what sort of led you into this performance dance?
Good question. I did start actually as a very young person. Mum put me into dance classes because I had a lot of energy, unruly energy, and it was just a way of sort of like channeling some of that. So, but I didn't entirely start with classical ballet. I started with jazz. But the thing, if you've got, you know, kids in your life who are into dancing, tap dancing, I think, is the key. I did tap dancing, and I really can still feel it in my body to this day. There's something about the Fred Astaire's and the Ginger Rogers and the looseness and the kind of, and the rhythm, and something that I feel has been so important in the trajectory of my own practice, which I know is strange to say. But of course I learned classical dance and jazz, and the classical dance, I think, gave me a lot of relationship to, you know, understanding the sort of body's architecture. There's a lot of kind of formal positions and elements that are coded in ballet, and ways of, I don't know how to explain them, but to do them. But like epaulements, knowing your firsts and your second positions, understanding the way the head kind of works, you know, in orientation to the whole body and what that produces. So ballet is sort of a defining feature, I think, in my own training. But I quickly knew I would more likely become a contemporary dancer, because there's certain physicalities that are more attuned to ballet. If you want longevity in a ballet career, my body wasn't really that particular type. But yeah, I think I was naturally drawn to artists in the visual art space. So once I became a contemporary dancer, I very quickly realised that I was really interested in ideas and concepts, and also people working slightly more slowly, maybe in research, or who are really kind of grappling with ideas and concepts, and that really suited my own practice in a way. So I was never the type of dancer who wanted to go and make a show about this and go and make another show about that, and I was really wanting to get into the weeds with ideas. And so I was drawn to visual artists, and have worked with a number of visual artists or choreographers who are proximate to visual art, and it's type of visual art history or visual art thinking. So that happened sometime in my late 20s and like mid to late 20s, and yeah, I've been situated more in this space since, actually.
I just wanted to, on behalf of RMOA, thank both Brooke and Sally for coming in and sharing their time today, and I hope we'll see some of you, if not all of you, tonight for Brooke's performance. I'm looking forward to that and officially launching this wonderful work. But if you could please make them feel very welcome and loved, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.